And with small pieces of wire like this, you might end up doing what I did. So better hang on tight. Hey guys, I am so sorry this video is late. We had a huge hailstorm, up to golf ball size hail, for over 30 minutes, and it caused a lot of damage, including roof, cars, and a bunch of property. But thank goodness we are all safe, and that is what counts. Now let's get started on this project. First, we're going to need these two 18 gauge pieces of wire cut at 8 centimeters each. We're also going to need some 20 gauge wire, 2 pieces cut at 4.5 centimeters. We're going to need some more 20 gauge wire, 2 pieces cut at 2.3 centimeters each. We're going to need some 24 gauge wire cut at 30 centimeters. We're going to need some sort of stone. I chose to use the 6mm Dragon Vein agate beads. You also need to make sure that the hole is going to fit that 18 gauge wire, and these do. I'm going to be using some chain nose pliers, bent chain nose pliers, flathead pliers, round nose pliers, looping pliers, and I'm using the 9mm part, the biggest barrel, but you can use anything as a mandrel as long as it's 9mm. We'll need some flush cutters, a cup burr, or a nail file or some type of file you can round over the ends of your ear wires, a chasing hammer, a bench block, and we're also going to use this rawhide hammer to help harden some of the wire. Now I just remembered that I forgot to add 2 more wires that are 20 gauge wires cut at 2.7 millimeters each for the beads. If you need to, you can check out my materials list in the video description below. Now let's get started on this project. First, we're going to need the 2 pieces of 20 gauge wire that are 8 centimeters long, and I'm going to use this as a mandrel. It's one of the things I forgot in my materials list, but this is about 12 centimeters in width, and we're going to take those 2 20 gauge 8 centimeter cut wires and put them on the back of that, right centered of that mandrel, and then we're going to wrap the wires around the mandrel, using my thumb to push them up against the back of it while I press the 2 top parts of that wire together. And then I'm going to slide 2 of my wires inside of the other 2 wires, and I will show you the reason why I'm doing this here in a moment. So there you can see I'm kind of spreading that apart and then pushing those wires right down into the middle there. So now we're going to remove these off the mandrel, and you're going to see why we put those wires in the center like we did. I've basically created a mirror image. Earrings are always made as mirror images so that they will look right on the ears. So now we're going to take the 2.3 centimeter 20 gauge wires that we had, the little tiny pieces here, and we're going to grab the round nose pliers and make a loop on each end of each of those wires. So here's a loop on this end, and then we're going to flip the piece over, and we're going to make a loop on the other end, both facing up, just like that, and we're going to repeat that on the second wire. So we're going to start with a loop on one end, And with small pieces of wire like this, you might end up doing what I did. So better hang on tight. So here we are, finishing off the other side of that piece again. And then we have two wires that are identical to each other. So now grabbing both of those pieces side by side, we're going to grab the brown nose pliers and put them between the barrels, and then pushing that wire with the loops up and push it downward around one of those barrels. Just like that. So you're making like a little U shape, kind of a little mountain there. And that's all you want to do with that. Now grabbing the teardrop shape again, we're going to grab the flat nose pliers, and with the bottom edge of that flat nose plier, we're going to line it up where the wires cross each other, and then make a little bend so that wire faces straight up from the base of that teardrop. And then we're going to flip the piece and do the same thing on the other side. And now we're going to do this with the second piece. The reason we're doing this is so that when I hammer these pieces out, those wires aren't crossing over each other. And then if you accidentally hammer too close to the top part of that, you end up making the wires kind of dent each other. And so I usually straighten them up out of the way so that when I go to hammer them, that's not going to be an issue. So that is why I face those up, and later I'm going to unbend one side of those, and you'll see that here in just a bit. So now I'm placing that teardrop shape onto my bench block, and I am hammering those flat all the way up to the top point. Being careful not to hammer where my thumb is, which is the top that's going to be the bail. So we want to make sure that we don't hammer that part. So here you can see I'm doing both of the teardrop shapes. And those are finished being hammered. And now we need to hammer these little hill or U-shaped pieces. There's that first one. We're going to flip it over and hammer the other side for a nice even hammering and flattening. And now we're going to do the second piece. And here we've finished hammering our little decorative pieces that we'll be using in our teardrop shape. So now we're going to attach our little decorative pieces onto these teardrop shapes, and we're going to attach them just like this. So to attach these pieces, we're going to need our 24 gauge wire that we had cut earlier, that 30 centimeter piece of 24 gauge wire. And I'm going to wrap this around that frame 3 times. So 1, 2, pushing those wraps up against each other nice and tight. And then a third wrap around just like that. And now I'm going to grab one of those decorative pieces, and the loop that is on the left side, we're going to thread this wire up through that loop, just like that. And then we're going to slide it all the way down until it meets the frame of the teardrop. You want to make sure that the top of that loop touches the bottom of the teardrop shape. You don't want them to overlap, they just need to touch. And now we're going to wrap the wire around that frame. So here you can see I've got a little bit of overlapping there, so I'm going to adjust it so that it sits below the frame of that wire here in just a moment. So here I'm doing another wrap around, the second wrap, and then I've adjusted that, and now I'm going to do a third wrap through. and up and around through the center of those wires. And here you can see I've got the 3 wraps going through the loop of the decorative piece. And we've got 3 wraps around the frame to begin with. Now we're just going to do the single wraps around the base of that teardrop all the way until we get to the other side of the decorative piece where the loop begins. So we're just going to keep wrapping single wraps here. There's probably about 6 or 7 wraps. I don't remember how many are there. I could probably count them for you, but it's going to be different with everyone depending on how big your teardrop shape is in your little decorative piece. So here I'm just doing one final wrap because I want those wraps to meet up really close to the top of that loop there on the right side. And now I'm going to start putting my wire through that loop and around the base of the teardrop, tying that piece to the frame of the teardrop. So, and again, you want to make sure that you keep the loop under the base of that teardrop. And then holding that piece in place, we're going to go ahead and put another wrap around through there. And then a 3rd wrap. Making sure you push your wraps together as you go. And I'm pushing that wire through one more time. And then back up through my teardrop. And now, after flattening these wires down a little bit to make sure it's nice and snug and tight, I'm going to continue wrapping 3 more wraps on the base of that teardrop shape. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So now you can see what that looks like with all those wrapped on there, and that piece is now connected. We're going to flip the piece over and we're going to cut off these little tails with our flush cutters. So I'm going to try to cut it so that it will end halfway over the frame of that teardrop. So I'm going to grab my bent chain nose pliers and burnish that wire down onto the frame. There we go. Oh, a little bit more. Make sure it's down so nothing is sticking up or poking. We don't want to snag any sweaters or anything. So here we're going to cut the other side now. And again, we're going to burnish that down with our bent chain nose pliers. And it's all nice and smooth. And there we go. And that is how you attach that little piece to the frame. So now we need to do that with the other piece. I'm not going to bore you and show you that again. So I did that off camera, and here we have 2 of those completed with the piece attached. Okay, so now we're going to grab our 2.7 centimeter cut pieces of 20 gauge wire. I'm showing you 4.5 centimeters here before I realized that these were too long, but you really just need 2.7 centimeters of wire for this. So here I'm grabbing my round nose pliers, and I'm going to create a loop at the end of this wire. Just like this. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that little loop up all the way so that it meets back with the wire. And then I'm going to straighten that loop at the top. So we're making a little head pin here. And we're going to do the same thing for the other wire. So again, grabbing the round nose pliers, I'm going to push the wire around the barrel of my round nose pliers till it meets up with the wire. So here I'm readjusting to kind of get rid of that little space. And then I'm going to straighten that loop up creating a little head pin. And tighten that up. There we go. And then I'm going to use these to put my beads on. So here I'm grabbing one of my 6mm dragon vein agate beads. I'm going to pop that on there. And then the loop is facing us right now. The opening of the loop is facing us. And we're going to take that top of the wire on top and bend it forward about 45-degree angle. There I go a little bit past, and then I decide, nope, I want it to be 45 degrees. Just like that. And we're going to make the loop to go the opposite direction of the bottom loop, or perpendicular to the bottom loop is more what I want to say. I'm going to cut off the tail at about, leaving about 8 millimeters left there, 8 to 10. And then we're going to make a very small loop there at the top of this bead. Just like that. And then bring in that wire right back to meet the other part of the wire there. So there you can see I've got the loops perpendicular to each other. So again, we're going to do that same thing with the other agate bead. Making that little 45-degree angle, cutting the wire so that it's about 8 to 10 millimeters, 1 centimeter. And then we're going to grab the round nose pliers and create our small loop at the top there. Just like that. So now we have 2 identical beads here. And now I'm going to open that loop by twisting it out away. Never pull your loops out. We twist it. If you pull them out away from itself, it will misshape the loop. You want to kind of twist it to the side. Now we're going to twist it right back in place. And that is going to hold right onto the base of this teardrop shape. So I'm just hanging it off of that little decorative piece that we attached. And now we're going to do the same thing with the other bead. We're going to go ahead and grab the chain nose pliers. And I'm going to twist open my loop. Just like that. And then grab my earring and pop that onto that little decorative section of the earring, just like that. And we're going to twist it back closed. Just like that. It has a little bit of a space, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out and make sure it's nice and tight. Like that. And there you can see, with the bead on there, how cute those are going to be. And so now we need to make the bail at the top of these earrings for the ear wires to attach to. So first we need to take one of those wires and straighten it out. So I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and I'm going to grab right at the bend and just straighten that wire out, just like that. Now you see how that crosses over the other side. I'm going to go ahead and kind of bend it over to make it so that we've got a nice 90-degree angle between both of those 2 wires. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to bend that wire around the other wire. And I'm just going to smush that together nice and snug as much as I can. And then with my flush cutters, I'm going to snip off the end of that wire just so that there's enough to kind of wrap around that wire nice and tight. Just like that. I end up switching to my bent chain nose pliers because it was easier to grab. And now with this leftover little piece on top, we're going to make a loop. Now I do make a mistake here. I'm going to show you that in this video here, that I make my loop so that it goes front to back like this. But when you're making your earrings, you need to make that loop so that it goes side to side. We should be able to look at the front of it and see the opening of the loop from the front of the earring. And I'll show you why that is here in just a minute. So there I have it all closed up. And now I'm going to do the same thing on my other earring. Again, I'm going to straighten out this wire, and this time I'm doing the opposite wire as well, and I'm using the flathead pliers. That tends to be a little bit easier than using the chain nose pliers. I'm going to straighten it out a little bit more, making sure that wire crosses over the top of the piece just like the other side did, but in the opposite direction. See, that one's going over the top from the left side, this one's going over the top from the right side. And since I keep going out of view here, I'm not going to bore you with showing you this second one again. And here it is through video editing, the two pieces completed. And now all we need to do is make our ear wires. So now grabbing 4.5 centimeter cut pieces of 20 gauge wire, we're going to make a loop at the end of the wire with our round nose pliers. Just like that. And again with the second piece, we're going to grab that, wrap that wire around the barrel of the round nose pliers, snug up that loop, and now we're going to take both of these wires and put them side by side. And then once we get those all nice and matched up, we're going to grab the looping pliers or a 9mm mandrel. So I'm using these, and the biggest barrel on the looping pliers is the 9mm mandrel. So I'm going to put them between these two biggest barrels, and the loops are going to face away from the 9mm barrel, and then I'm going to wrap the wire around the 9mm barrel just like this until it meets up with those loops like that. And now I'm going to pull that off the mandrel, and I'm going to make sure that these are all lined up together. And once I get them to line up perfectly, I'm going to grab my flush cutters and just cut off the excess. I want the ends of these to come right at the top of where the loops are on the other side of the earrings there. And as you can see, they're still a little bit too long, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little bit more. Like that. And now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and grab about 2 millimeters from the bottom, or 3 millimeters. And then I'm going to make a little bend at the end, and I'm going to bend it toward us, away from the loops. Just like that. So we have a little bend. And there you can see we got the shape of our ear wires finished. Now I'm going to grab my cut burr, or you can grab a file, whichever you want to use to get the ends of this ear wire rounded off or smoothed off. We don't want any burrs on the end of that wire, because that can kind of be painful putting them into your ears like that. So this is just deburring the end of this wire. That's why it's called a cut burr. It's like a little mini cup that wraps around the wire and files it down. And here you can see the one on the right is the one I used the cut burr on. The one on the left is just the fresh cut. So you can kind of see the difference there. It's just not a flat, jagged cut anymore. So here I'm going to do the second one. Now once you get that done, you can do this step or you don't have to. I like to do it because it adds just a little decorative flair and it strengthens the wire. So I take my ear wire and I put it right on the edge here of the bench block, and I'm going to hammer just the side that's with the loop on it. So I'm going to kind of pull that wire out and away from the main part of the ear wire, and I'm also going to hammer the little loop to kind of give that some rigidity. And there you can see it's just flattened on that right side, and you can see that shine there. And notice this part here is still rounded. We want that part to stay rounded because that's the part that goes in the ear. It just makes it more comfortable to wear like that. And now we're going to do the same thing with the other ear wire. So again, just on this side of the ear, and then I'm going to pull that wire out. There it is, nice and flattened. And now this is where the rawhide hammer comes in. I'm just going to hammer the whole piece with the rawhide hammer. And what that does is it just work hardens the wire. That way it doesn't bend quite as easily as if you didn't do it. Just hardens that wire up. So now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and I'm going to grab the side of that loop, and I'm going to twist that out away from the side there. Grab my earring, pop that on, and here you see my mistake. Notice how that earring is laying. It's not supposed to go sideways like that. So I realized my mistake and I corrected that bail on the earring so that's the right direction. And now I'm going to twist that loop back into place on my ear wire. And now my earring is facing the correct direction. There we go. So always watch that. And you make sure you get your ear wires on the right direction. Again, we're going to twist that loop out to the side. Taking my corrected earring and popping that onto the ear wire. Oh, and making sure that my loop is open enough to actually put the earring on the ear wire. And now we're going to close that loop back up. And there we have a completed pair of earrings. Now this is before I polished or corrected any tool marks or anything like that in the earrings. And then after, this is what they looked like. So there you can see a nice, beautiful shine and a completed pair of earrings. If you guys enjoyed watching this video, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment and tell me what you thought of this piece. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for watching.